I mean, those are great, like lead off points for me for sure. I think oftentimes when people say they want consequences, they want punishment. And I think that even sitting with me is a consequence, sitting with a sort of coordinator and having a conversation, staying after school to have some dialogue, staying in at lunch or recess to have a dialogue. Those are all consequences of the action. Where I make a distinction is the punishment, right? What's the deal here? Punishment is the infliction of pain in order to correct behavior, to sort of put some downward pressure on that behavior. Punishments don't work. What punishment does is oftentimes hide behavior, and then kids get really good at sneaking and or lying and or shirking their responsibilities.
And seems to create also a culture of fear, of just fear.
And a culture of trying to get other kids in trouble too, right? So you say, oh, cheating. You're like, well, you're also running with the basketball. And there isn't a sort of self-recognition of what it is. So I think the consequences are still present. There's always consequences. And this is where some of our like national colleagues and I maybe, to some degree disagree, is like, I'm up for suspensions as a service to the conference, as a gap, as some time, as some like, yeah, okay, let's take a little break and process what happened. Sure. But as a thing on its own, absolutely not. As a vehicle for waiting until a young person to take responsibility for their actions. And this is where it gets to the sort of second part of that question, which is what's accountability look like? This is it. This isn't the whole ball game, but this is the second innings of the ball game. Is the accountability. Can we allow space for young people to take responsibility for their actions? You, having been a classroom teacher and a principal, like totally had this, I don't know that we didn't ask this question, but I know that there are young people who you said, hey, Nicholas, what you did, probably not the smartest thing to do. That was pretty hurtful, and other people have been impacted, and could you not do that again in the future? You understand that's not okay? And they go like, right. And then they go off and they go play. They go back at recess. They go back to the classroom, and we're like, what? I did all the work. I did all the processing. I did the narration. I did all this stuff. The first thing we talk about is the responsibility taking. And so I asked this question to my 4-year-old. My 4-year-old son, who gets it. I've got a 4 and a 2-year-old, and she's barely verbal, but we're working on it already. Which is what happened, and a long, obnoxious pause for when young people are ready to share. And don't let I don't know be an excuse. Don't let I made a mistake be an excuse, or sort of moving on. Right, sitting in that sort of that difficult mess of saying, yeah, I said something hurtful. I yelled at the teacher. I was out of class. It's essential work.
I just want to return to, because you said it so quickly, and I want to make sure that those who are listening understand, that's the first question. What happened, right? What happened? As opposed to me telling you what I observed. And that could really serve us as superintendents even with our own interactions with our cabinet, with those who report to us, even with our boards to some degree, is to talk about what happened as a reflective tool before we say what we saw happened. Yeah. Second question, typically, if I remember correctly, it's been a little while, and I have my card, but it's down in my office, which is, what were you thinking at the time? Isn't it something along those lines of just helping to then now take that next step of what happened, and then what were you thinking, right? Not in the way that potentially previous generations would have castigated us. What were you thinking, right? It's more of, what were you thinking?
It's a lot of delivery. It's a lot of time.
Right. Wrong. I do hear previous generations of Long Island family members saying it in a very specific way.
Yeah. What were you thinking? I think about what was the goal? What were you trying to accomplish? Those are all really legitimate things. And largely speaking, young people, when they say, I don't know, that's true. It was impulsive. And we just kind of move on. Okay. Once we got the accountability, what were you trying to accomplish? I was trying to go to the bathroom and I took 20 minutes. Okay. All right. Yeah. How's it impact people? And we just move on. And you're like, great. Now what? Who's been impacted and how? Oh, well, other kids couldn't go to the restroom. Okay, great. All right. And I ask this question. Now what? We need to do what now? How do we make things better? How do we move forward from here? And kid might make some commitment to not be in the restroom for 20 minutes or apologize in the classroom. Right. Okay. Fantastic. I think those are really small examples. I want to go back to the earlier question about big stories, because this is sort of tied in here to the accountability, to the repair, to just such an important part of restorative justice.